Hello, we're live. This time was really quick. I was closing the door. So I'll wait another couple of minutes. So forgive me. Can you hear me okay? I think there's one person there. Yeah, is everything fine? Yeah. Let me just bring up my notes for today. Hopefully everyone is fine. I'm just fuffing a little bit because I started a live stream a few minutes earlier. So feel free to grab a drink, make yourself a coffee or a tea. Of course, being Italian for me, is espresso. And if you have had a chance to read the part that we're going to discuss today, which is the power of communication, you're more than welcome to type any question you have already in the live chat. Somehow the live chats disappear after the live stream. I'm not entirely sure what the matter is there. But so today we're going to talk about, obviously, SustainABLE. And we're going to talk about the power of communication. There you go, with the three little monkeys there. Did you know I actually drew the illustrations here? I toyed with the idea of becoming an illustrator a little bit before starting the Green Gorilla. But then I decided that, maybe sustainability needed me. Well, I hope so anyway. For those that joined us right now, thank you very much. I am just, chatting freely right now, waiting for 12:30. UK time, just in case someone else is joining us in a couple of minutes at the time that I said I was going to do the stream. We're going to talk about the power of communication. It's really, I will say, if you have to start from somewhere, start from the power of communication. Start with honing your communication skills. So I don't know exactly where to look. Here, there. Right, let me adjust a little bit. I need, a fancier background, but at the moment I've got the kids at home, so I am actually using my bedroom to do these streams. Anyway, the power of adaptability, that's another one. Resilience, all the time. So feel free to type in the chat, anything you like. Say hello to my mom, that sort of thing. No, I'm joking, but any questions you might have about communication, about listening and speaking, and any trouble you might have with presenting, because obviously I'm going to go through the content of this chapter, the power of communication. However, if you have any specific questions, it'd be great to have them and to share them with me. And I know lots of people watch this later, so do the same. If you're not watching live, please type in the comments below and I will answer as soon as I can. So I think we can gently start, I would say. What do you reckon? Okay, so this chapter here, the power of communication, which is chapter 2 or part 2 of the book, starts with a brilliant quote that I really love by George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And it's so true, because often we talk and we exchange even, opinions with others, but very often we don't communicate well. So the fact that we open our mouth and make sounds doesn't actually mean that we have communicated. What do I mean by that? The thing is, the communication has to go somewhere, right? It has to have a scope of some sort, especially in business. Otherwise, we're just chit-chatting, which is absolutely fine. But communicating with someone, and so getting somewhere with your thinking and even influencing others, is very dependent on a number of factors. And I'm going to cover 3 main factors of good communication in this live stream. One is listening, super important, but often underestimated. Speaking, obviously, and body language, because we might not pay so much attention to body language, or at least not as much as we should. Obviously, in the previous live streams, we talked about several things. So the starting point, why you might have issues at the moment in terms of making an impact, making your voice heard, etc. And we have established that your technical skills are really important. We spoke about that last week, but they're not enough to set you apart. So what is, and what will set you apart? Obviously, you've gone through a certain process to get to this point. You mastered your trade, hopefully, or if you're new to the sustainability world, maybe you've studied until this point. So, but anyway, you spend some time really focusing on your technical skills. That, however, and even if you're brilliant at what you do, that doesn't mean that you know how to communicate with your clients or with other people, your colleagues or your boss or even your family. Sometimes, I'm speaking from experience. Communication is the number one problem that breaks up marriages. Anyway, let me not go there, but communication is so important. So, when you talk, the first thing you should ask yourself is whether you have listened attentively to your client's needs and wants. So when you are, for example, you are in a meeting situation, you're meeting a new client, what is the first thing you do? Because theoretically, you should ask a bunch of questions. You shouldn't really talk very much at all unless you ask to do that. That's the thing. You really need to focus on what your client needs and wants. It's communication is a two-way street. So it's not just about you opening your mouth and making sounds. It's definitely someone else also talking to you and listening to you just the same way. Often that doesn't happen very well. The other thing is, we prepare a lot, if we have a presentation instead, you prepare a lot perhaps on the content of the presentation. You spend a lot of time on your slides, you make them pretty, or you spend a lot of time on your data and making sure the data are correct, which is all fine. But how much time do you actually spend looking, for example, at your body language? How much time do you spend rehearsing and thinking, how can I deliver this presentation powerfully? What does my voice sound like? And I know it's awful, but sometimes we should really record ourselves. It's horrible. It cringes me when you listen to yourself again. And it was like this for me as well. It's not anymore. Not that I super like my voice or my accent or anything like this, and I do make mistakes still while I speak, and I know that. But I got over that. I know that I wouldn't say charisma, it would be a bit arrogant, but I know that I can communicate. And so when I listen to myself again, and I often re-listen to these live streams again and watch myself to make sure the next time I am doing it better. I use my hands a lot. Okay, fine. That's part of me being Italian. You might have the same, or you might be too stiff. So these are all things that you can notice only as a sort of external person. So looking again at you at yourself after you have done what you had to do. Now, in meetings, obviously, it's a bit more difficult, but you could always ask a friendly colleague to tell you, how did I go? What do you think? Especially if you are at the beginning of your career, that can be very valuable feedback for you. Also, think about leaders. Do you know leaders that you watch on TV? Okay, you might like them, you might don't like them, but look at how they talk and what is their voice like? What is are their gestures like? And we're going to talk about that a bit more later. I want to really share with you an example of, bad communication, because I think you can learn a lot from the bad experiences. It's also shared in the book. And now that I think about it, it's really funny, but it was a surreal experience of mine. Years ago, when I was working at BRE, I had, and I'm not going to name names, obviously, but I had this the director interviewing me. We're talking many years ago, interviewing me for an internal job. So I would have gone from one department to another one. And I've interviewed for that. Interview is a big word, I would say, because I sat there and I didn't open my mouth. She was a stream of consciousness. Do you know when someone just talks and talks and talks? And she was saying how incredible, her department is, and how incredible she is, and how many clients she won, and how, fast-paced everything is, and how I would need to hit the ground running, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. She didn't ask me one question. How can you evaluate a candidate if you do not ask one single question? It was absolutely ridiculous. After half an hour of this, and I promise it was half an hour because I was, nervously now and then watching the clock on the wall, she said, "Oh, sorry, I need to dash off to my next meeting. It was lovely to speak to you." And she went. And I was like, well, did that happen to me? It was absurd. And, it goes without saying that I didn't accept that job, which actually she gave to me. I don't know what. I mean, I haven't done absolutely anything in that particular interview. Now, that is not communication, guys. That is not. That is just following your stream of consciousness and, no filter, and vomiting out all you have in your head. Terrible. Now, what are the reasons why, though, we don't communicate well? It comes to different elements, and obviously we are people, so we're complex in terms of how we are brought up, where we are brought up, so our culture, the way our parents talk to us, our personal past experiences, which is very key to the way we react today to similar situations. So were they traumatic? Did you have a bad presentation under your belt and then now you dread speaking in front of others? Or, a bad meeting that really, you still can't digest? All of this really has an impact on the way you communicate today. And also, what are your values? So the whole set of things that make you have an impact. The other thing is, when you communicate with someone, there are also external factors. So if I'm talking to you right now, I actually can't see anyone in the face, okay? In a way, it's easier because I'm just talking and I can see someone putting a like there and I see the numbers going up and down. That's fine. When I, however, look at someone in the face and we are in a busy cafe and I can't hear my own voice because it's really noisy, that's not very conducive to a good communication. Or if the line is cracking up on the phone, not a good situation where to have a conversation. Or maybe the other person is having a really bad day, like they just received bad news. Or also when you present in front of, for example, a group of people that you already know, don't believe in you, are not sustainability advocates, that that you are talking to someone who's basically a brick wall. All of this can contribute to you not being as effective as a communicator as you would like to be. So let's analyze the various elements that can make you a better communicator. And we can start from listening, because I think it's probably the most important thing. I was reminded by Jerry Udelson, who is also the author of my foreword in the book, that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for one reason. And it's so important. We do need to listen twice as much as we speak. Why? Because it's important to build the trust in the other person, to start with, first of all. When you talk, you're repeating what you already know, but when you listen, you might learn something new. And that's a quote from the Dalai Lama, which I absolutely love. You develop patience because you're sitting there and you're waiting for the information to come to you. Now, we live in a very fast-paced world, and whether that, it's a good thing, a bad thing, we have forgotten the good old patience that probably our ancestors had. So you develop patience, and it's a very good skill to have. You become more approachable because you are open to others. You increase your competence because you might learn stuff that you didn't know before. You will have less misunderstandings, another important thing. And then you might spot issues and risks that you might not have spotted otherwise. So listening is absolutely key, crucial to anything you do in your work. Often, this is another good quote, often people don't listen to understand, they actually listen to reply. How many times I catch myself in there? You know, when I'm listening to someone and I'm already formulating my little answer in my head. Does any happen to you as well? Now, there are some practical tips on how to deal with this sort of thing and how to listen better. So these are my practical tips. First of all, there is a very good TED Talk, which is also mentioned in the book, by Celeste Headley, I think is the way you pronounce her name. And it's called The 10 Ways to Have a Better Communication, actually a better conversation. Really illuminating, very funny, very simple, but it goes, you know, under the skin of the problem of listening. So I would say, absolutely watch that. Rule number 1, don't multitask. Don't multitask. I think I brought that example 1 million times, and forgive me if I'm repeating the same thing, but I think it's quite shocking when my, it was one of the senior C-suite person, so it was one of the leaders in the company where I worked before. When I had a meeting with him, or anyone by any means, it's not just me, he was actually tweeting, you know, and he was on the phone all the time. He wouldn't really listen to you. I mean, or he pretended he was listening. He was saying, no, I know what you're saying, but how can you formulate a thought in your head, a tweet in your head, and listen to someone that actually has probably a problem right there? I think that's such bad practice. And as you can see, even leaders make that sort of mistake. In fact, leaders make that mistake even more. I'm going to tell you that in a minute, explain that a bit better. So please don't multitask. If you can put mobile phones away, if you can put, for your own sake and for, you know, the other people's sake, just do that. The other thing to listen better is to ask open-ended questions, and that's your why, especially why. We will talk about why a lot more next week when we talk about selling. Very important. So why, how, where, when, all these who, all these important open questions, because if you don't ask open questions, you might ask closed questions, and then the answer is yes or no. You haven't found out pretty much nothing new. Well, if you ask an open question, then your audience can respond and formulate their own thoughts and give you the full version of what they think, which is a much better way of approaching any issue, really. When they respond, really listen to the answers. And I am sure you know when I'm saying really listen to the answer. Now, this morning, if you saw my post on LinkedIn or if you read my newsletter today, I quoted my son, who is 5, just finished preschool, and he said, Mummy, the teacher often tells me, open your listening ears. As in like, what? Open your ears. Because children often don't listen. Well, they're not just children, even us. So please open your listening ears every time you speak to someone, which doesn't mean just hearing the noise, is actually really paying attention to what they say. Another thing is we get distracted with our own thoughts. Even if we haven't got our mobile phone in front of us or something else, we might get distracted because, we're eager to respond. Or we're thinking, oh, gosh, I need to buy, bread. I forgot bread. So all of that stuff really comes in our mind. It's absolutely normal. We have a monkey mind. That's absolutely fine. However, I suggest to use a little mindfulness technique to stop your monkey mind from going off when you're listening to someone. And that's labeling your thoughts. So when a thought comes into your mind, if it's important, write it down. So if it's something that you must remember, like buy bread, then write it down, buy bread. If it's a thought related to what you're listening to, so the person that is speaking, write it down all the same, just a word, so that you remember later. You don't keep on replaying it in your head like crazy. But you can also if it's something silly, like a song that comes into your head, because all sorts of things happen, right? During boring meetings, perhaps, label it. So say, okay, thought, and then let it go, if you can manage to let it go. or maybe feeling, maybe you feel anxious for some reason, then acknowledge that feeling, and then let it go. This is a very useful technique to master, just to let go of things that are not important. The other thing is, try not to interrupt. Now, it's quite common to interrupt other people. I was talking last night with my masterminders, the people that are doing the SustainABLE mastermind. I'm going to talk about that at the end of this. I hope I will remember. So we were talking about how sometimes, especially as a woman, and I apologize in advance to all the men here, probably this is not what you do, but women in the workplace often get interrupted while they're speaking. I don't know whether that's something to do with the alpha male coming out and, cutting short because they don't got time to waste listening to you, blah, blah, blah. But it's so rude, guys. It's so rude. Not only that, you really give the wrong impression that you're impatient, that you are not listening, etc. So another suggestion, again, instead of interrupting and say, yeah, I understand what you're saying, because you might not know actually where they wanted to go with their thoughts, or just interrupting because you think of what you were saying is more important than what the other person is saying, write it down again. So let them speak, let them finish all their thinking, because sometimes people think better by, talking. We actually elaborate in our head while we speak. Write it down. And then, so it doesn't play in your head over and over again, and you don't have to interrupt. And then at the end, you can provide your feedback. Pay attention also to the small talk. So when you meet someone at the beginning, and I'm talking about normal times when, it's not virtual right now, but when you meet someone and then you start with a small talk, the weather, maybe the children, maybe the pets, your likes, your dislikes, etc. Register those things in your head, have them in your head, because if you remember what people care about, even when they're doing small talk, maybe over coffee in a break or something, is a key thing that can help you anchoring your conversation when you speak to them and want to influence them. So because you are going to understand what they care about, their values, and maybe play a little bit to their values. So when you're selling sustainability and you know that someone has a family, maybe it's and they speak about their family, warmly, then when you talk about sustainability, you can always say, well, and as and you have a family, I'm sure you don't want a world that is going to crumble and is going to be inhabitable within a very short space of time. That sort of thing. So do think about and remember, if you can, or even write it down, what they care about on a personal level. Because I think I said that last time, and I'm going to repeat that over and over again. Relationships are built from one person to another person. It's not company to company, even when we're talking about business. Is a personal thing. So the more you get to know and to have a relationship of some sort with the person you have in front of you, the better your chances of influencing them. Now, probably you interrupt others, or you talk, but you don't listen so much because you're eager to, because you know your stuff and you want to show that that you know your stuff. But think about why you're doing it. I think it's important to first understand why you do that. Also, pontificating doesn't do you any favor, and I think I shared that in one of the previous lives. If you are pontificating, if you are like having the sword or the ethical sustainability war in your hand all the time, people just get annoyed, especially those that don't share your same value. Now, they might want to do, I don't know, a certification or an environmental labeling or some sort with you, but they might be driving a big SUV and, they don't care less. Don't judge them, because even if you don't have the same values, your job is not to judge them, is to listen to their pain, to their issues, understand it really well, and respond with a perfectly tailored, sustainable solution. That way, you're going to make a positive change anyway, because you're going to do what you say, and in spite of their own beliefs. So I think that's a win-win, isn't it? And also think about that. You can't control other people. I'm sorry, you can influence them, but changing other people, controlling their behavior is absolutely outside your remit. And for those of you in a relationship, probably you understood by now, you can't change people, but you can influence them. You can suggest something. Maybe that you can make them change their mind now and then, but you can't control them. So try and influence their decisions from the sustainability point of view when we're talking work and not relationship, in spite of what they think about it. The one key element to that, because it might come a bit hard for you to digest that, is that I really disagree with their lifestyle. I've seen it, like they use, bottled water all the time. I don't know, that annoys you. I do find myself a bit annoyed sometimes when I see people wasting or, whatever, people that don't live like I do or try to live. And the key element there is to use empathy. So step into your client's shoes, step into your audience shoes and understand where they're coming from. That way, you will improve your communication. If you see their standing point, if you see where they come from, at the beginning, I told you what makes someone is, the way you were brought up, your culture, all of this has an impact in the values that you have. So try and be empathic, I would say that's the word. Step into your client's shoes, understand where they come from, and that will automatically improve your communication with them. Imagine like you are talking to a child. Surely you don't use the same language that you would to me. Okay. And it's pretty much the same thing. Try and step into your client's shoes and think the way they think, and try and use words that they would understand. But I'm going ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about that in a second a bit better. The other thing is, if they feel listened to, they might change their own mind without you doing anything. So it's worth trying. Finally, when you finish a session, when you manage to listen attentively, and it might be really hard at the beginning, you might not have the patience to go all the way through, but try all of these little tips. And also in the book, you have a summary of those, so you can just, go through it again if you want to. Ask yourself, how did it go? What insight do you have that can help me next time? Okay, I'm going to take a little pause. If you have questions about listening or anything that I said until this point, or comments, please type them in the live chat. Otherwise, we're going to move on to body language, which is another very, very important element. Yes, we're going to talk about body language. So think about the last time you felt uncomfortable in a situation, in a conversation. Think about how your body reacted, because we are one. It's not that our body is completely separate from our mind, right? What goes on here goes in your body and vice versa. So maybe you felt tense and so your shoulders were like this, or maybe you went like this, or you close your eyes because you were cringing, I don't know, whatever. If the conversation didn't go well, or maybe even subtly, you started sweating, which happens to me a bit when I'm nervous, or you close your fist like this because you were angry. Try and learn how to read your own body in all situations and control the way your body reacts, because you can do that. Now, there is an interesting study by the American psychologist Albert Mehrabian many years ago that said something along these lines. When we speak, 38% of what people perceive is voice, 55% is body language, and only 7% is content. So content and what you actually say, and if you remember what I said at the beginning, all the prep that you do, all your pretty slides, all the stuff that you want to say is only going to be perceived in 7%, well, out of everything, out of what you communicate, that's what comes through at 7%. The thing that is most obvious about your message is actually your body language, and that's the way you move, the way you speak, your hands, especially hands, are so, they have their own language, don't they? So it's important. And especially, I think Albert Mehrabian in this case wanted to say that if your message is at odds with your body language, so if you're saying something really sad, maybe you're doing a eulogy or something, and then you're all smiling and happy, people will be confused. And so what they perceive is more the thing that is at odds, which is obviously the body language in that case. So pay attention to facial expressions and body language, because they are an integral part of your communication package. So body language, as you can imagine, is a whole science. So there is a lot, there are studies, you can take, I believe you can take degrees on body language. And there are, FBI experts that learn how to read body language so well that they catch spies, even if obviously spies are very good at hiding. So just because of their body language. So today, obviously, we're not going to go through the whole language of, your body language, but we are going to go through a few basic things. Now, think about, for example, how politicians, and I was saying, leaders or politicians behave and use their body language. Now, a piece of research recently done by a university said that politicians that stand with their feet shoulder width apart, so quite, solidly planted on the floor, are actually 33% more likely to get elected. How crazy is that? What are they communicating with their posture, which is open and, solid on the floor? They are communicating that they are in charge. Okay. How can you do the same? So how can you improve your body language? The first thing is your posture is so important. So an open posture is a posture where your shoulders are open and down, your head is high, your legs, if you're standing, are solidly planted on the ground. You can try the mountain pose, which is a yoga posture, which is quite useful, but it's simply effectively, standing with your feet shoulder width apart, your hands like this along your sides, and your shoulders back and your head high, and then you feel that. Really, it's actually a strong posture. It seems silly, but it's a strong posture. You can practice it. It's very easy. Another thing you can think about when you are presenting or you are, in front of people, to remember your posture, is to imagine you have a piece of string pulling you from the top of your head so that you are actually straight. I love that feeling. So try it now. Try and think how a piece of string could pull from the top of your head. The other thing is, don't create a barrier when talking to others. So besides, trying to be as open as possible, when you fold your arms like this, and sometimes we do it because we don't know where to put our arms or our hands, and so it's quite normal. But this shows that you have a barrier, against others. So try not to do that. Now, good leaders have been taught and have been coached on where to put their hands. Because to be fair, when you are, for example, in an official situation, a networking situation, you don't know where to put them. Have you noticed the Angela Merkel position is something like that in front of her stomach? I can't show you because something like this. Obviously, someone told her to do that, because every single picture of Angela Merkel, the leader of Germany, she actually has her hands like this. So try and think how you can use your hand, where you can put your hand to show that you're actually relaxed and in charge, etc. Another thing is, when you use your body and your voice in a proper manner, let's say, in a positive manner, you look more charismatic, you look more professional, you start creating rapport. Good leaders, so think about one good leader that you know, are charismatic, are professional, and create rapport. They are expressive, they're sensitive, but they have also strong internal control. They look quite self-assured. Well, if you fret, if you're nervous, if you show that you're nervous and fret, obviously you have the opposite result. Think about what gestures they use in that case. So when, you know, they are in control and they are, you know, good leaders, let's say, open, expressive, etc. Their hand often are the palms like this, or like this, because they want you to trust them. They look open. While on the opposite, think about someone who's maybe in control of themselves, but they are the opposite type of leader who's not empathetic, who's cold, who's arrogant, who's domineering, and they point their finger and they use their hands on the opposite with their palms down and they dominate. Okay, and I'm sure you can think of at least about one that's really quite like this. So obviously you are a sustainability person, you want to be a good leader, so think about that. So some practical tips. Straighten up. You know, I gave you a couple of tips on how to do that. So shoulders back, think about the string, the pulling you up, straighten up. And then relax, smile, and look at people in the eyes. You know, I always forget to look at the camera. I look at myself in my image. Look at them in the eye, because you're going to increase your trust in yourself. And also, if you can do that, because at the moment there is a bit of a problem with shaking hands with people, shake hands is the oldest way of demonstrating that you come in peace. I've read somewhere that back in the days, thousands of years ago, they used to handshake to show that they didn't have any arms, any weapons in their hands, like a dagger. So shaking hands means I'm not armed, I'm coming in peace. So it's a beautiful, beautiful gesture when we will eventually be able to use it again. Smiling, a little bit to that thing, you know, talk about smiling. It's important. I believe in smiling. Smiling saved my life so many times. So when I didn't know what to say, a smile tells 1,000 words. However, women are more prone to smiling, and unfortunately, that sometimes is perceived as a sign that you're not powerful. Because you are vulnerable, you're smiling, you're vulnerable. Now, I know now when to use my smile. Like yesterday, I had a tough meeting, like an important meeting. And at the beginning, I smiled, introduced myself, and then I quickly gathered and gauged from the other participants that I was the only one doing it. So I stopped. You know, I introduced myself and I smiled, and I think that's fine. But I stopped and I was dead serious for the rest of the session. It went really well. It's just because it was all men and I was the only woman. So think about that. And even if you are a man, it's nice to smile, but don't look like you're happy-go-lucky and you laugh all the time or smile all the time. Just because, unfortunately, there is it's an instinctive thing that makes you look like less powerful. Another little trick to influence others and look, in your body language is to mirror someone's posture. Now, you don't have to mock them. So if they're, for example, using, putting their heads like this, you can slightly do this, but just in a way that is not perceivable, very little, because we are, again, it's sort of an instinctive animal level. We imitate each other when we like each other. So, this sort of mirroring in your body can help establishing a rapport better. Any questions, guys? Because I feel I'm going, with the stream. Happy to take any questions, any comments, anything at all. We're entering now the last section of today's session, which is how to speak with impact. And that's another important key. So we talked about listening, we talked about body language, now we're talking about speaking. Very, very important in communication, obviously. Now, let me start with a little story, which is my own story of when I started Green Gorilla a couple of years ago. I immediately figured out that if I wanted to make an impact in the world with sustainability, I had to start from the children. Now, I have 2 school children. So I volunteered to go to their school and talk about sustainability. So about climate change and about waste, the things that children can understand, energy, etc. Goodness gracious, it was the most difficult thing I ever done in my life. Why? Because in my 16 years experience in sustainability, plus the ones in architecture before, I always talk to adults about sustainability. I always talk about sustainable buildings with adults. I am not used to talk to children about sustainability beside my own children, but that actually helped me because I already know the language of my children. Thing is, unpack the jargon, talk about climate change in a way that is easy to understand and not scary. Talk about how energy works or how renewable energy works, without any technical terms, or all of this is so hard. You have to step back 3 times and really focus on your audience. That's the key. Focus on your audience. What can they understand what I say? So the same way, sometimes you speak to clients, for example, that are not sustainability professionals. And while they might know what climate change is because they read it on the paper or listen it, on the news, they might not know the nitty-gritty of what you're trying to say. They might not understand the language you are using. And often when we are technical people, we come into, say, a meeting or a work situation, giving for granted that everyone in the room understands us. That's not the case, guys. Absolutely not the case. So the key there is to try and tune in with the person you have in front of you, engage whether they get what you say, and you will immediately understand that by their body language and their face expressions. It's a fine balance. So we've been patronizing, of course. You don't want to repeat things that might be absolutely obvious. But for example, yesterday, for those of you that work in sustainable construction, in my meeting, I said, I am the BREEAM AP for this project. My colleague is the BREEAM assessor. And then I was going on, and then I thought, hold on 1 second, do they know what the difference is between the two roles? So I said, would it be helpful if I explain what a BREEAM AP is and does and what a BREEAM assessor does? And, timidly, someone said, yeah, go ahead. Because the thing is also, the clients might feel stupid not knowing something. If you go confidently and say, yeah, I'm the BREEAM AP and he's the BREEAM assessor, they might not question you, but they might not understand what you're talking about. So I stopped, I explained, and then we moved on. And I think that's helpful. So if you even have a doubt, just ask. If they say, no, don't worry, we know, then, go ahead and, continue talking. Now, if you are familiar with Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple's presentations, you'll be already knowing what I'm talking about. He was incredible, and he started as a technical person. But his presentations are masterful. I would say Google him, go on YouTube, watch some of his videos. Amazing. Because for example, it's very famous, a presentation when he introduced the new iPhone. I think it was 2007. And instead of using all complicated words, he said something like, touch your music, gorgeous album art, find your music fast. It didn't talk about whatever, I'm not technical in that technology. He actually used plain words that a person in primary school would understand. The thing is, did he trivialize technology? I don't think he did. I think he actually made it accessible. I think he did something wonderful, and that's why his talks have been watched millions of times. And why it's probably one of the ingredients of the success of Apple, because it is intuitive. You don't need a manual to operate with an iPhone. So why would you want to give a manual to people to listen to you? Do you see what I mean? Make it accessible. And the more we manage to do that, guys, the more we'll be able to change this world and to convince people about the value of sustainability. The more we talk accessibly, the better it will be for us and our world absolutely we can change it with that way. Communication can change the world, can change the world. I am absolutely sure about that. So again, a little moment of reflection. When you speak to a client, do you feel compelled to show your expertise, and that's why you use technical terms? Or do you think your client would think less of you if you didn't? Maybe they would think that you're not the expert that you claim to be. Or maybe you are too eager to get on with, the nitty-gritty and getting stuck into the project and forget the big picture. Because if that's the case, just think again. Think again. If they don't understand what you're saying, then you are incurring in a lot of trouble, including misunderstandings, mistakes down the line. Again, the communication is not clear. And you can imagine what happens then. So let's look at jargon, some practical tips. So if you use jargon, and we all do, technical people have their own little manual, jargon manual. Some practical tips for unpacking that. Think about whether people in your life, like your family, your friends, would understand what you're saying. When you use words like, maybe they're too long or too technical, say biophilia, interoperability, biomimicry, so long and so forth. Do you use acronyms? So CSR, ESG, EMS, blah, 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 whatever. I also drew this little picture, which I quite like. I'm quite proud of this. If you saw that, okay, let me put it there. It's this lady, which look uncannily like me, talking a lot of jargon. I don't know if you can see that. Now, try and think of whether these acronyms are actually clear and unpack them all the time. It doesn't matter. You spend 1 more second talking, but at least you say the CSR is corporate and social responsibility. ESG is environmental and social governance. EMS is environmental management system, blah, 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 blah. Whoever knows already won't mind. Who doesn't know will learn. Perfect. Also think about the expressions when you use value proposition, carbon footprint, circular economy. Do they actually know what they are? For us, they're like second nature. But would someone that never, even thought about circular economy, what does it mean? Explain. So what other words can you use instead of those? And if you can't, because, I don't know, circular economy, right? How can you explain it in a way that is memorable? So if they ask, someone asks that person tomorrow, they will remember what circular economy is. So try and think before you present to someone or a new client, think about what words you're going to use and how to unpack them. And so that's quite important, jargon and jargon busting. I'm going to have a little sip of coffee. Okay, voice. How wonderful is our voice? It's a musical instrument, isn't it? Some people use it in an imaginable way, and they use it and tune it like a musical instrument. You can go to a coach and make it improved or whatever. But even if you don't want to do that, it is important to pay attention to the way you use your voice. So as an example, think about those presentations, and I'm sure we all have at least one in our life, when someone was presenting in front of a big crowd, for example, a conference, and they were talking like this, really whispering. Or they were talking like this and they didn't put any meaning or expression in their talking. So monotone, complete monotone. How boring is that? How bad is that? Think about your voice as an instrument and think how you can use it for maximum impact. The first rule is breathe. We forget to breathe. It's so simple. We can't live without, but we often have a very shallow breath. So when we are nervous, actually your diaphragm closes, and you're not able to use all your capacity, your lung capacity, to speak loud. And again, posture together makes you speak better. Imagine, the opera singers, they're all puffed up because they need to put a lot of air in their lungs. Okay. So now and then take a pause, breathe, and you're going to go so much better. You're going to tire less, and I do that, I make that mistake often. Like today, for example, I'm just realizing I don't think I breathed very much at all, but I'm going to do it now. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to breathe. And if anything, the pauses make your speech all the more impactful. If you pause now and then to breathe, then, your message will sink in. The other thing is, if you talk with a low voice, monotone, or too quick, that's another very very big mistake, when you rush your words because maybe you're nervous and you want this to be over as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, you give the impression that you really don't care. Well, first of all, that you're not very impactful at all, and then that you really don't care. You don't care about your audience because you haven't really tuned in with them. You're not there to make them understand what you're talking about. You're there just to, get over with it very soon. So what pace? The pace is super important as well. Again, breathe, pause, think about it. Now, I do speak quite quickly, both in Italian and in English. But I learned through my experience now, I think 15 years teaching and training people, that especially because I'm foreigner, when I speak in English, I have to slow down and it doesn't make me look thick. Well, I don't think, I hope it doesn't. I hope it does make me look like someone who knows what she's talking about. That's the thing. And especially being a foreigner, some of my words and my pronunciation might not be completely correct. So hopefully by slowing down, people will understand from the context what I'm talking about. If I'm too quick, that doesn't happen. So you have to slow down, whatever your language, whatever, wherever you come from, slow down. It just improves your gravitas. So it makes you look like you know your stuff and you know what you're talking about. Plus, it gives you time to think. If you are too quick, then you might run out of ideas. You might run out of, or you might get confused. Well, if you stop and breathe and, you take your time, you have time to think more deeply and to lower your anxiety level as well. On the opposite, you might be too loud. I know I have a loud voice. So actually this is good for me because especially when I speak to big audiences, I don't need a microphone. I can get my voice really loud and reach the bottom of the room. However, for many people who are also quite shy, they might be introverts, they might not have that thing. So don't be too loud because you might sound aggressive. You might come across as aggressive. But on the opposite, if you are too quiet, do some exercises to try and raise your voice again from the diaphragm. It's important to show that you know what you're talking about. Okay, and I think that's the end of it. So guys, can you let me know? I know there's a few people online right now. Can you let me know whether you have any questions, any comments, what you thought of it? Is it helpful? Did you learn something new? Maybe you can tell me what caught your attention in today's presentation. Was there something that was particularly useful? It's also helpful for me to understand whether what I'm talking about is useful at all or I'm only talking nonsense. So I'm going to pause there 1 second to give you time to type. And that's the same for people watching it on repeat. As I said, I go through comments all the time. So if there is any comment, any questions, or how to apply this in your own life, for example, which is a very useful I'm here to answer your questions. Maybe you have a specific problem. The other thing is, if it's something very private, you don't want to share it, then feel free to email me on info@thegreengorilla.co.uk, and you're going to be able to I will be able to help and willing to help as well. So any comments, any questions? I'm by myself today. I'm sure not. I think people are a bit under the heat. But thank you, by the way. Thank you for participating live, for those that are doing this right now. I know it's August and people are away and it's harder to connect, but hopefully this is giving you some value. That's all I'm hoping. And as you can see, I'm doing it for free. It's fun for me. I love it. And so, but do let me know what you think of it. Do let me know whether you have any questions or any comments or want me to help with anything. And I'll be happy to do that. And if there isn't anything right now, I am going to close this stream. And next week, so before I do that, I'm going to tell you what next week has for us. So we are halfway through, basically. We got another 3 to go. So next week is an excellent one. Next week is Selling 101 for Technical People. So don't miss that, because it's probably the one session when I present this that people love the most. And I suppose, we all need a little encouragement to be able to sell ethically our sustainability values, which sounds like an oxymoron, so something at odd, but actually is very possible, and is what we should do really to advance sustainability in the world. So join me next week, same time, 12:30 p.m. BST, so British Summer Time, for another session of the SustainABLE book club, and we're going to talk about Selling 101 for Technical People. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to comment. I will go back to you as soon as possible. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Love you.